Support for This Might Be Helpful is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped Performance Package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 8 million men and their 16 million balls worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping by entering the code ROSIN at manscaped.com. Now, I remember viscerally the first time I attempted to shave my balls. I skipped the YouTube tutorials, I stole my dad's electric razor, sorry dad, and immediately caused what I considered in that moment to be irreparable damage. For years after, even the notion of putting an electric razor near my family jewels elicited palpable fear, much to my partner's disappointment. That was until my Manscaped Performance Package 4.0 arrived, and boy, howdy, is this a game changer. Inside this package, you will find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver bowl deodorant, the Crop Reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold your goodies. This is the future of male grooming, and I dare say the greatest bowl trimmer ever. And I can say that because I do not fear it when I pick it up. It feels quite safe and sturdy and gentle and loving in my hands and has an ergonomic shape that just provides a little TLC to those TLBs, tiny little balls. So, boys out there, if it's time to take care of yourself, go to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping when you enter the code ROSIN at checkout. I wish your balls the best. Hello, welcome back to This Might Be Helpful, and I sincerely hope that it will be. I'm your host, Cam, joined today by Kelly Boys. Kelly, thank you so much for being here. I know this has been in the works for a while, and I've looked forward to it for a very long time. Your practices and yoga nidras and meditations have been something that I've engaged in for over the last 6 months repeatedly. You've been the teacher that I keep going back to, and now even my nervous system is attuned to your voice. So even just hearing that, I start to settle, and there's just so much richness of sensation that comes from engaging with your practice, and I'm really excited to speak about that. So thank you for being here. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much for that. And I'm really glad to be here. It always makes me happy to hear when people share that they're getting a lot out of what I put out into the world, because I've also gotten so much out of what my teachers and other people that I know that teach this have shared. And so I know the feeling of really loving something. And yeah, I'm a mindfulness trainer, and I teach yoga nidra and have been teaching yoga nidra and training teachers in that. I started about 15 years ago in my practice. And right now I'm doing a number of different things. I'm a coach. I put yoga nidra content out on Instagram and YouTube, and teach retreats in yoga nidra and non-sleep deep rest. And I also work with the Foundation for a Mindful Society, where we're looking to grow this project around creating mindful cities. So we have a couple cities we're working with, and we're looking to grow the project that we have. And I usually have my hands in a couple different things on the board of the Prison Yoga Project, because I worked in prison yoga for a couple of years and many other things. But right now I have a cat nearby, and I'm happy to be here.
No, it's incredible. The avenues that you can take for this practice, and how you can incorporate that into environments that otherwise are pretty foreign to these ideas, particularly the prison setting. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you got into that space, and then what you experienced while you were in there?
Yeah, sure. Apparently my mom said when I was a kid, I always told her that I wanted to go to prison when I grew up. I wanted to work in prisons somehow. I had this thing for prisons. And she reminded me of that later when I did start working in the prisons, that I used to tell her that when I was a kid. And so basically, I think the first prison I worked in was a jail in Cincinnati, a women's jail. And I had just learned yoga nidra. I'd gone through the training to be a teacher, and I loved it so much, and it was transforming my life, and I just wanted to get in there with it. And so I walked up into this jail and basically said, I'd love to volunteer. This is what it is. All you need is yoga mats. I can bring them. Can I teach this here? And they said, yeah, go ahead. There's 50 women. So I would go there weekly and teach a series on yoga nidra. And as I was learning it, I was absolutely a total newbie to it. And from there, later, I was living in California and then worked at San Bruno County Jail and that was with incarcerated or jailed veterans who were sort of in transition. When you go to a jail, you get everything because people are there on their way somewhere else. And so that was quite an experience. And James Fox of the Prison Yoga Project heard that I was going into San Bruno County Jail, and he was in San Quentin State Prison in Northern California. And he came and visited the jail with me and then took me with him into San Quentin. And we just decided to start working with incarcerated veterans in San Quentin. And we developed a program we taught every week for 2 years and would go walk through the yard and be with the same group of guys, and this was anywhere from really young veterans to Korean War veterans. And he would teach yoga and I would teach yoga nidra. And they would say afterwards, this is the only time we feel like we're not in prison is when we do this yoga nidra. And some of them would actually listen with CDs, right? We listened to CDs, they had CD players like on repeat at night in order to combat the night terrors or nightmares they might be having from combat trauma, et cetera. So yeah, it was an amazing time for me. I learned so much being there in that group and feel like it was one of the biggest privileges I've had to be able to be in that environment and teach. And I think I was actually drawn there. I wouldn't have said this out loud to myself at the time, but I had been married very young, and the marriage there was domestic violence involved. And so that was like age 18 to 22, so young. And I think I was really working through and sitting with, the other side of the spectrum. It's like, what causes people to do this? And is there hope for rehabilitation and for engaging with taking responsibility, but also self-forgiveness, and then getting back out into society and doing different, and so I think that was driving me as well. Although I never brought my personal experience into the room, of course, never said anything. I actually ran into, it's rare. So we were teaching veterans who were lifers with a potential for parole. So these were pretty serious offenses that they'd had. And I actually ran into one of the guys on a trail once, and he said to me, we never knew, your story, but we knew that we could trust you. There was something there that you'd been through. And so I think that for me, it was healing to be able to offer these practices in an environment where people are typically kind of thought of as, hopeless or just not people to invest in. And yeah, so it's a bit of a long answer to your question, but.
But that's what we're here for, the long answers, because and you speak about this in your book, the blind spot effect, and how we want to be seen. And we have this need to be seen, to be called forth and be seen in, our entirety is a lofty goal, but to be seen in this full expression of ourselves in a compassionate light. And we are often kind of craving to be seen by people that are not really seeing themselves. And so it's hard to expect that of them, expect that of others if they haven't had that ability to show up and face their own blind spots, to be able to admit that we do have these obstructions to our perception and obstructions to connection. And one of the things I think that makes us really receptive to the wisdom and teachings of others is there's this recognizable but kind of undefinable aspect of resonance that comes when somebody is speaking from experience, because that experience has a correlate to compassion, and that compassion makes people feel seen, and so they can show up with all of themselves and not showing up to a practice thinking I'm only here for my best self. It's like I get to show up with all of me and all of these parts of me that get to be called forth and loved in the open. To be able to come completely out of hiding is a really beautiful gift.
Beautiful way to say that. Yeah, yeah. And to be willing to be seen for kind of all of who we are, and then to have that human pain that, you know, some people haven't done that work yet and or may not do the work, and to reveal ourselves to ourselves anyway as we're encountering that person. And then the compassion that can come with seeing where they are on the path. And then the beauty that can come when there's actually a meeting from wholeness. It's like, hi, I see you. And it's all welcome. You know, it really is all welcome, including the really yucky bits and including the tough stuff, because I know all of this is in me too. And then the nervous system really settles when that's known. And it's an embodied kind of a knowing that you have, right? And of course, you always build trust with someone over time. But when there is that sense that I can be here fully, I can be myself in this person's presence and in my own presence. Wow, that's pretty radical.
It is radical, particularly when that's never happened for you. When you, especially, you know, in that prison setting where they have been, you know, punished for something that occurred. And in your book, you discussed you know, you added up all of the life sentences, how many years these people would be in prison for, and then all of the minutes that those instances took to get them in that prison. And it was minutes that attributed to years, and that flash in the pan, that second of unconscious reaction, that reactivity, where, you know, they do something and they go, oh my goodness, what just happened? What have I done? And it's like this accumulation of things occurring in the blind spots that then manifest in this visceral moment. And it doesn't mean that's who we are. It's like being able to reflect on these things as what happened to me, these things that occurred, as opposed to these things that I am. And when they're things that occurred, we can almost snip the direct attachment and identification with that thing so that we can see it more from these different perspectives, and then create that space that allows us to love and forgive that thing. And that space of vulnerability it's the key in being able to love yourself, because vulnerability means you need to accept these parts of ourselves that we keep pushed away.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's again so well said, and there's that kind of compassion that does, you know, arise in you as you meet those parts, and as you do see it, kind of what you're talking about as kind of a play, like, oh, the unconscious and what has come before is now kind of coming to light, and I can see it now, and I don't have to be identified with it. It's not who I am essentially. And if I'm able to kind of anchor my identity in something more essential, more real and lasting, then okay, I can kind of withstand the fact that I've done something awful, right? I can withstand the fact that I'm not a perfect human being, and then I can face it and then take responsibility. And I think these things are key for all of us, right? Because what happens when we hurt someone is the defense goes up, like, no, I didn't do it. It's you, right? And all the things that come up in the face of having to face one's own sort of, you could call them failures of empathy, failures of action. And so for me, writing The Blind Spot Effect was, I was wanting to kind of level the playing field and go, hey, we're all in this together. Nobody has this right here. Some of us are learning, you know, quicker, but this is something that we all have the capacity both to harm others and then also to like rectify that by being in relationship with the other, right? And to be able to be in the prison where I was able to see some of that transformation kind of over time. And I'll really say James Fox is the one. I mean, he's been going in there, I think now it's 15 years weekly, if you could imagine. And often it's twice a week, and he has a long drive to get there. And just work. And now the Prison Yoga Project is global, and it's in so many prisons around the world. And it's just amazing to see what one person has done with that kind of dedication and that kind of seeing, right? Like he's deeply seeing these men. And I think there was something neat about he and I going in together too. And he's, there's the wounding in us of the masculine and the feminine, and to be able to go in there and kind of hold space and to be solid and steady every week, kind of shaking the guys' hands and meeting them just where they were, it was quite an experience.
And, being in that setting as well, where you are working with really challenging circumstances, because there's undeniable pain and hurt and trauma, and so often the thing that got those people in that prison was really just an accumulation of all the things that happened to them in the split second of emergence. And so there are things that happened, right? And we discuss awareness as, awareness is key, and there are so many, obviously, flavors of awareness and dimensions of awareness, because being aware of a pattern doesn't absolve it. We can be aware of it, but what is the quality of that awareness, the character of that awareness, and how can we be aware of what happened, but with a different relationship to that thing? Because we're not ever meeting reality directly. It's always a reality mediated by our relationship to reality. And so, for me, this practice of meditation, of yoga nidra, is changing our relationship to reality, because what is seen is really how it's seen. And we can be aware of something, but until we are aware of it through maybe the perceptive lens of love, then that's when we get to kind of move forward, because the story changes.
Absolutely. It so changes. And yeah, it's almost like before you can try to hack something, you're trying to really work with a pattern, and we all do that. And that's the other thing, is there's no one formula for how to find freedom, right? And so, we can work with something, gain insight, really see the pattern, but it's like there's a way that it still has us. And then sometimes it's just sitting with it and cooking in the stew of meeting yourself. And then, this like love breaks through. And it's almost like a grace at times. And sure, other times it's a skill that you build and that you apply to the situation. But sometimes it's truly like a grace. It's like this freedom opened up. And I have my own experience. I have clients that come and say, I don't know, I'm trying to get back to what it was that brought that level of kind of inner freedom and clarity from this pattern. And I don't know, and I can say that it's often what you're speaking of is you're tuning in more to the awareness that's there in a way that, like, if you do it to try to break through the thing and get rid of it, et cetera, it won't work. But if you line up with it, like line up with the truth, and you're lining up because you really believe and know that in your being, and then kind of love kind of shines through, and then you see this. I like your use of love and the word love, and it's like love shines through, and then you see this pattern, and then there's this whole different relationship with it, and things can really dissolve, or they can kind of revisit in a couple years, or it comes back again and again over time, and that same process happens. It's a bit of a mystery how we work with our unconscious and with our patterns and with what's coming to light in ourselves, and then how that gets integrated into more wholeness. And then, we can then be in the world more in a way that we didn't yet know that we were capable of.
And it's this, this process of self-discovery and discovery of the selves. It's amazing because right now there's so much cultural emphasis on self-love and self-compassion, and mindfulness as a theme is in the general collective zeitgeist, which is incredible. But with that cultural emphasis on self-love also comes doubt, because I think that for people who haven't maybe yet discovered that within themselves, to ask them to love themselves is a big ask. And especially if they're over on this spectrum of being entrenched in shame, you can be aware of all your patterns in the world, but if we're relating to all of those patterns through shame, it's not something that we want to bring into the light. Shame likes to be in the shadows. It likes to be in the trenches. Like, don't look at me. I'm over here being shameful. Yes, I know I have things to fix. I know I have things to work on, but just don't look at me. And so how do we start to bridge this experiential gap between these different states of consciousness? Because every state of consciousness has like a character of energy, a character of awareness, and also an amount of almost directable energy. I think about the energy of anger, and there's lots and lots of energy, but it's very challenging to direct consciously. Whereas once we get to these stages of like acceptance or courage, willingness, the quality of the energy starts to change and we can direct it a little bit more consciously. And so for someone who is struggling to understand how they can love themselves without feeling like they're deluding themselves, where would you start?
Great question. Yeah, you'll feel it when you're kind of deluding yourself, right? And some people will say, well, fake it till you make it. Well, I mean, sure, try, try to do the self-love thing and see where it doesn't work. And that's where there's the crack, that's where the light comes in. Right there. It's like, where is this not quote working? Like, how am I using this as a hammer instead of, a skillful tool right now to, it's like, let me get away from this shame by loving myself. I love myself. I love myself. No, I don't. Okay. That did not work. There's something inside that the whole being and psyche says no. And I don't even know what this means to love myself. And there's such a gap right now for me between my relationship with myself and what I'm hearing someone say it can be like. And it's like, how do you bridge that gap that you're talking about? And the way I know is to meet yourself right where, there's this kind of crack and the light's coming in and then it feels uncomfortable and it's shame. And it's all the ways that I've up until now refused who I am, essentially. And it's like refuse these, what are actually totally gifts of elements of who we most deeply are. But then they were shamed somehow, and then the shame sits on top of them. And so it's how could I turn toward the shame as a friend? And shame is such, it's one of the hardest emotions to feel. It really has to do with being out of the tribe. And, I'm not okay as I am. It's the worst feeling, right? And so it's not one of those emotion one wants to really turn toward when you feel it. And it's like, how can I get out of this and get back to self-love and find the real self-love? And the truth is it's turning toward the shame and meeting it. And that simple process of welcoming, not so simple when it's a tough emotion. And then as I was just working with someone recently and helping them really turn toward the shame they felt as a contraction in the belly that kind of arose in social circumstances, right? And then to be able to turn towards that and meet it. And they kind of said they forgot, oh, it's so simple. That's right. Just meeting it. Yeah. And just feeling it. Okay. Oh, wow. Interesting. I'm starting to feel more calm. It's like there's this love coming in now. And oh, wait, if you really resolve shame, what one mentor of mine said, it resolves into potency. So you get to actually find your deep aliveness in the world. And so the shame can be like a portal to this kind of aliveness in the world. But it's a very strong messenger to keep yourself small just in case it's not correct, right? Or all sorts of other things. And I'm not okay as I am fundamentally. So if I'm able to turn and meet that and be with it and see the kind of beautiful mess of my life here, and get more and more comfortable with that, more and more comfortable with that. That's self-love. That is self-love. I don't have to sit down and love myself at that point. I am loving myself by turning toward what's painful and by growing the capacity to be like, see myself as whole with the brokenness kind of that's felt too. That there's actually, it's not like I'm getting to wholeness. The wholeness is already here, and is sort of turning towards meeting, welcoming in, and then integrating this shame into more fullness of who I am. These things are subtle, and but it's nice to talk about them in this way, because so that people can really see this is what the potential of this work is. It's not like go meet your shame so you can feel better. It's go meet your shame because, wow, there's a precious gift there waiting to be delivered.
And it's this presence with the practice that you need as well, because if it's all outcome based, then all that we are doing is for this next step. Maybe this will heal me. Maybe that will fix me. But when we maybe lack that fully embodied sensation of self-love, we still can engage in acts of love. It is an act of love to turn towards the shadow. It is an act of love to sit with all that is emerging within me. It is an act of love to allow that to come and allow it to pass without pushing anything away, without pulling it closer. That is all an act of love. And through these practices, we do start to build new pathways of love. So with this thing that before, maybe it was an experience, maybe a memory, maybe this pattern that we've identified, and the only way that we knew it was through these pathways of shame. But as we decide to act in accordance with love, we do build these networks and their emotional correlates, so that no longer do we have to travel the same path. We can take different roads, and it's not about deleting what is there, but we can create new roads so that we have new options. And it's like driving somewhere in the dark for the first time. You don't really know where you're going. You turn down the music, you're looking for the exit, and it requires more concentration. There's an element of confusion that you have to roll with, but then as you continue to drive that road, it's more and more clear, and then you can take it at will. You don't need to think about where you're going. You just know where you are, and you know that you'll get there. And I think, especially the practice of yoga nidra, you are really consciously discovering the topography of your cognitive and emotional landscape. And that's, these blind spots. It's almost like that blind spot exists where the boundaries of our beliefs are. Sorry, all right, you don't love yourself. Why do you believe that? What beliefs are contributing to this notion? What kind of criteria are involved for self-love? Is there some kind of unspoken, implicit expectation of how this should feel and what it should look like? Or are there belief boundaries in place that, once recognized and realized, expose you to this blind spot? And maybe that blind spot is not a bad thing at all. Maybe it's not something that you've been running from, just something that you weren't aware of, an aspect of love that was always there.
That is so beautiful, beautifully said, truly. And yeah, I think it's really important what you say, that you're putting it out there that, hey, this is possible to see from another way. Like this actually, you don't actually have to slog through it too. There is a possibility for all of us to break through the conditioning of the mind and to see more clearly and to see with these eyes of love and the transformative eyes, right? And where, just to say that it's possible to see something so radically differently than the way that you're currently seeing it. And I say you, I mean me and all of us. and all the ways to get there are varied. But like you say, once you start to get used to that, then you can find the pathway more, it's like a groove in your mind and you find the pathway for it. And then interestingly, once you find the pathway for it and then you're using it as a tool to get rid of something, it won't work anymore. You have to find a new pathway. And it's like, it's this elusive thing, which is sort of a perspective, or just this awareness that we all have ability to have contact with, but that won't shape itself to, the way that our ego structures itself with control and doubt and moving from managing things. It's much more wild and free than that. And then when it gets applied into situations, it's really fun, actually. And then you can kind of start seeing life as like, even though this is really painful right now, this pattern that is surfacing. So I can speak for myself, and I have one right now. It's kind of surfacing. It's not overly painful, but enough to where it's getting my attention, right? and it's just, we can forget. It's like, oh yeah, right. This too. And then this is actually, as you say, this is kind of a roadmap to more wholeness. This is coming in with, if I have that growth mindset, to be able to actually open up this whole aspect of myself I didn't know was possible, that I could believe in life in this way, or see with the eyes of love in this way. And then it's in this constant kind of growth path, but one that isn't there where you're trying to perfect yourself. You're just curious, becoming more and more whole and full as you go. And that's where I like that idea of the blind spots, because it's like there, the unconscious is broad in each of us, and it's collective, and it's individual, and it's familial. And, if one wants to really dive into one's psyche and as it applies to life moment to moment, that there's a lot there. But when you see from this simple lens of awareness and love, then things do actually become simple, oddly, right? And it's such an interesting process.
And that simplicity is so kind of funny and paradoxical, because in order for anything to be, really simple like that, it's like we need to take the infinitely complex road to get there. Like the notion of just show up, like it's so simple. It can't really be confused. All you need to do is show up to the circumstances that allow what you desire to unfold, but only through the repeated and sometimes laborious process of showing up do we see the simplicity of that message. And this is the same with anything that we want to do. The answers to these really big questions are really often so simple, like to just do the thing, that we know we should do, to do the thing that we know will make us feel better. It's so obvious, but we have the resistance to it because we have so much, symbology and obstructions to our perception. And we think about like the symbology of exercise and how much is correlated with that, with dieting and self-shame and insecurity and fear and rejection. And then we can look at it, particularly through this practice of meditation, where we get a little bit of space between these things, and we can see that resistance as not something to fear, not something to be ashamed of, but like, oh, there's the gate to freedom. I'm resisting this. What is beyond that resistance? What obstruction is channeling this stimuli into me in this hyper personally relevant manner that maybe is inhibiting me from seeing what this could be? And so we have these questions like, all right, these things that cause me angst and turmoil, maybe they are not what they appear to be. Maybe that is a story. It's an energetic imprint from some experience that we collected, and that was what happened. But what happened isn't who I am. Maybe who I am can be discovered by moving towards this resistance, and maybe it can be fun. Maybe I can really enjoy doing this. Maybe I can love all of these parts of me that I'm afraid of, these parts of me that I haven't been willing to call to the surface. And maybe when I do that, I'll discover that I didn't need to reject these things in the first place, that healing isn't this absolution of something. It isn't extracting me from ever needing to deal with it again, but it does help me change my relationship to it. And I can love myself while still having these difficult days, while knowing that this journey is ongoing. I'm never going to reach a finish line where I go, all right, cool, all my patterns are solved, I'm done. Tick, tick, tick.
Exactly. Yeah, the whole thing of meeting resistance is such a good way. And I like the simple mindfulness definition. I got this from the Mindful UK report. And it's just paying attention in the present moment with curiosity and kindness to your inner and outer environment. And, there's something so good just about the simplicity of that, and then applying that to what you're talking about. And then if I apply that to resistance, well, that takes a little bit. It takes some learning. It takes some practice. Okay, all right, how am I mindfully aware of the resistance, and without just kind of becoming this mindful robot that's like, I'm noticing resistance, right? I'm going to engage with what I'm noticing too. And so, and that's just, you develop that way of being. And then as you engage with the resistance, like you say, the welcoming comes in.
You're creating this space for more of you to coexist with all of you. And we have these many faceted versions of the self, and kind of looking at the self as really this shape-shifting vehicle that carries us through the never-ending variability of circumstance and change, rather than this self that needs to be defended. Like, this is me, that's who I am, I can't help it, that's just what I am. Whenever we're leading with I, me, and my, that ego is in control, and the ego doesn't want to be threatened. It doesn't want to change. It likes things how they are, how it sees them. And so when it comes to these defensive mechanisms of self, how can we use that as a tool to discover what exists beyond that, the parameter of that self?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with defense in particular, it's always a sign that there's something being protected, and there's more to know, more to see. The thing with defense is it feels so believable in the moment, and our nervous systems are so wired to, kind of either attack or run away or do what they do when we're being, defensive. But that defense, when it comes up, if we see it as a signal that there's something really important here that I'm trying to protect, that is an aspect of what I'm identifying with as who I am. And if I were to, in a safe kind of a place, in other words, when I'm with myself or when I'm with a friend or a therapist, and not necessarily, exposing your belly to someone who's going to attack you, right? But if you're in a place that you can really look at this defense with curiosity and be really, really, truly curious, like what is scary to me about this, and what's at risk here? It's like, what's at risk here? And were I to lean into that and lower the defenses a little bit, what would I have a friend, Matt Licata. He is just a wonderful human. He's got a big following, I think, on Instagram. And he always says, what is it you're not wanting to feel? What is it you're not wanting to feel? And so when the defense comes up, that's often you're not wanting to feel vulnerable. You're not wanting to feel what the thing that's at stake. And if we're able to turn toward and meet that part that feels vulnerable and that feels like something at stake, it's almost like that gets welcomed and, like I say, I think integrated more into the fullness of who we are. And kind of paradoxically, then we don't have such a strong egoic hold on our identity. It's like by turning toward and meeting these parts and integrating and welcoming them, I can actually say, this is all a play. This isn't me at some level. And yes, it is, but it's not something I need to defend and attack others to preserve. There's something more essential that's stable and safe and good here that it's hard to describe, but yeah, I think part of that is just lowering the defenses, but also being really kind to oneself about like our nervous systems. And this, I'm so curious and interested in the nervous system and how it basically governs so much of what we do. and so, to also be kind with yourself about that. And if you're feeling like, you're needing to defend, you really have to bring your nervous system back down to a baseline before you can look at what it is that you're defending. And then once you do, there you go. There's a lot of possibility there.
And that's where that mindfulness comes in, that beautiful interplay between attention and awareness. If I can grasp with my attention that there is something that I'm not really willing to feel right now, and then I can use that top-down processing to ask, well, why don't I want to feel that thing? Without any judgment or criticism of the answer, just really asking the question and seeing what kind of answer emerges. I asked myself, there's a friend of mine, Tommy, who's a brilliant teacher, neuroscientist, deep into the meditative practice, and he will always text me, always ask me, what is your current state of mind? And what is your intended state of mind? And it's a beautiful moment of reflection. All right, what is my current state of mind? Well, maybe a little bit anxious, maybe not very motivated, maybe fearful or feeling disorganized and scattered, but what is my intended state of mind? Well, my intended state of mind would be grounded and clear and, driven by my purpose, at least in tune with this intrinsic desire to continue acting out my dharma, acting out my purpose, the alleviation of suffering, and that begins with my own. We have to use that interplay of attention and awareness and mindfulness to then go, all right, so there's something that I would like to instigate a change here. I would like to shift my state. I'd like to change how I'm thinking, but in order to do that, I'll change how I'm feeling, because that foaming, broiling mass of chemistry in there is the script that the actors of my thoughts are speaking in accordance with. And if I want the actors to say something different, I'm not going to shout at them. I'm going to change the script. If I can change how I feel, that will just naturally begin to change how I'm thinking. And it's this kind of top-down and bottom-up approach, and where we meet in the middle of that. If I can think my way into an intention and then use that intention to feel my way up into my thoughts, then we kind of have this junction in the middle. And when those two are harmonious, the top down and the bottom up, that's when we have these moments of, everything is okay. Okay, there are things to work on. There always are. But everything is okay.
I love that. Yeah, it's almost like you're naturally doing these opposites, and there's a lot of work in Yoga Nidra with working with opposites, where you're feeling scattered or confused or whatever it is, and then you go, okay, well, if this weren't here, what would be here? Okay, clarity and calm, and then you really feel that state, and then in Yoga Nidra then go back to the scattered and confused, and then you kind of go back to the feeling calm and clear, and then you hold both simultaneously, and you just see, oh, okay, yeah, and like you said, like something's deeply okay here. Equanimity is present while these states are coming and going. So you kind of unhooked yourself from one, and then you're willing to be sort of fluid with them. So yeah, okay, so sometimes I can feel that, and I know that I can turn toward the opposite, embrace it, feel it in my body, and then check and see what's here now. So it's a really wise way of getting yourself unstuck without refusing your experience, because when you're doing it from refusal, then it all gets very confusing, and it'll come back with a vengeance, etc. But when you're doing it like, okay, yeah, in this moment, I'm going to drop and do 20 push-ups because, that's actually what is best for my nervous system. It's not turning toward my shame in this moment, right? It's taking some kind of a skillful action in the face of what I know to be true.
A skillful action in the face of what I know to be true. Yes, that's really beautiful, because it's also to attain any kind of skillful action is practice. We can't expect these things of ourselves before we've really initiated that. And I think expectation is a big part of being able to practice sustainably, because similar to how anytime we are defending who we are, we're really defending who we were, because even as we've spoken those words, that moment that we ascribe that to has passed. And so we're always saying who we were a moment ago. We can never capture who we are right now. And so really, the present moment is where we have greatest potential to meet, accept, love, and be all of ourselves, all of ourself, that capital self. And it's not something we can describe and put a label to and define, because as soon as we do, that moment has passed. And expectation is disrupting that embodied presence, because I'm only present for this next moment and what I may get out of that. And so really, this conscious letting go of expectations is another one of those snags that we can let go of. And by identifying those snags and those expectations, and maybe even the blind spots that those threads are coming from, like, where is this expectation coming from? Where did it originate? Is there a space in me, a blind space that is holding on to more of these threads? Is there something over there that is throwing these expectations and kind of desperate desires at me from afar that maybe I'm not seeing? And sometimes you do come across these blind spots that are not just a single kind of isolated, conceptual place, but really this realm that many things are coming from. And we can treat the symptomology of it, the leaves and the trees, but if we are really wanting to dig at the roots of this thing, we have to look beyond the content of that thought and more to wherever this energetic line is coming from. And so when it comes to the practice, many people know that we should sit with our feelings, but also that knowing is kind of, a lot of it is baseless, right? We know many things, but those knowings are like these isolated pockets of information perceived and received through various streams of information, and the way that we looked at that information determines how usable it is, how relevant it is, and how empowering it is. People are on social media all the time, and they're constantly getting things that they should do. Even listening to me, there'll be people that listen to my stuff and go, oh, I really need to be meditating. I really got to be doing this. And there's so much that they know they should be doing. And I think that accumulates into this overwhelm of like, oh, there's so much to do. There's so much work to be done. I got to do the inner work. And it becomes this kind of externally motivated thing.
Yeah.
How do we recalibrate and find some kind of center that allows us to work with what we are and where we are?
Yeah. So great. Yeah. It's just a good question to live with. And I do think in many ways we're apprenticing ourselves to the unknown. And I love David White's work, where it's just he's that poet that talks about, you're just beyond yourself is one of his poems, but he's talking about you're seeing at this horizon that you're looking toward a horizon you don't quite almost yet see. It's coming into view, and we're apprenticing ourselves to the unknown, but it's actually very simple moment to moment. As we do so, we can trust that we don't need to overwhelm our nervous systems with all the data that's coming in from our conscious and unconscious and from the world around us. We can actually do these rest practices to bring our nervous system back to a baseline kind of feeling of ease and rest. And then there's that next moment. And then I'm open. I'm more open to what's not known here. I don't see it as a threat. I don't see all of this as something to figure out. And what you were speaking to is when you do start to actually step back a little bit even further, then you're seeing it's actually not about just kind of looking at each of those beliefs and seeing where you're in your own way. If you want to go for it, you're really diving beneath that into the core of you and into the core holding that's there, that's like self, world, and something's not okay about that. And so this thing needs defended here. And so I think these rest practices like yoga nidra really can support us to just begin to release that holding and release that essential holding. And when that gets more loose and actually becomes released, then those it sort of like trickles all the way up, you know, into all the layers of the psyche. And something is known about who we are essentially. It's like you just kind of see that the way you've taken yourself so seriously, and I know you know this, it's just this feeling of seeing how, you know, you're playing whack-a-mole with all your beliefs over here, and then another one pops up, and then they get that one, and it's like, well, okay, if you just go, like, take the machine apart, you know, and like get down to the mechanism that's driving that thing, right? And then as I meet that, it's just as at a sensate level, it's a very embodied exploration. And then as that begins to soften or perhaps release entirely, I see, oh, okay, there's something about the way I'm holding myself separate from the world around me that's unnecessary. It's actually unnecessary. And I'm scared of the freedom that I'll break out into were I to really release that. But it's good, I think, to say this and speak of these things, because often when you hear so much about mindfulness and like things you should be doing, it's like the self-help hamster wheel thing. I think I put that in my book, where you can get on that wheel and as one of my mentors said, you're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Like the whole thing's kind of you're like, wait, let me just move this around over here, you know, and it's just kind of going down, right? And so like what if you like just see that, you know, you're sort of trying to manage something that can't be managed, you know, and that as you let go of that managing, there's some kind of a deeper release of holding. And I see I'm not separate, and wow, no wonder we defend ourselves from this recognition, because then there I'm breaking out into freedom. I'm breaking out into autonomy. I now don't know what the next minute holds, and here I am for it and with it. And so it requires kind of a great deal of all the skills one has built on the path, right? To be able to apply to that level of kind of shift in perception. And of course, then it can come and go. And then there's all kinds of ways to work with what's called spiritual awakening or spiritual recognition there. And it doesn't look one way, but that there's this level of freedom, I think, that we're talking about in this conversation that is included in it is the path of mindfulness and the path of yoga nidra and all that's possible there. But also it kind of blows a lot of that out of the water in terms of just all the things you need to be doing. And then you're there with your life, and then you do the things that's there to do in the next moment, right? Like what's here for me in the next moment. I think I was quoting C.S. Lewis this morning in a class that I taught. It was something like, you know, joy bursts forth, he said, when we just do the good work that's there to be done in the next moment. And when we stop trying to like create joy, but we actually just let it burst forth because we're taking these actions spontaneously, moment to moment.
That feels so good to hear the spontaneity of it, because that kind of, it allows us to tune in more to the absolute finitude of each moment, and through that finitude, the finite nature of our lives and every moment we live, it can take away that feeling of everythingness that needs to be done. Like, by definition, you will not do it all. You will not solve everything. You will not figure it all out. The absolute most that you can ever hope to do is be able to meet each moment with intention, and as that intention evolves, being more open, and through that openness, a softening, and that softening helping to defocalize what you're seeing so that it's not so sharp and edgy, but really this blanketed softness that through that kind of almost deliberate haze, we can see these greater pictures, by sharpening the view and looking at the individual components. I'm not sure where this piece goes. I'm not sure where that piece goes, and that confusion that comes from a destabilized worldview, because sometimes the practice is very disruptive to what we thought we knew. And we do make this kind of direct contact with reality. And sometimes that's very confronting, because in a moment, your beliefs can fracture and the world feels more unsteady because your ego doesn't know what to do. And then, of course, the ego will easily latch on to, well, that was awakening. I'm awakened now. And this beautiful, loop of gorgeous contradictions, and how the work is never done, but the work can get more fun. And by meeting ourselves where we are and giving love to the nervous system through practice and the integration of these new understandings of self and the willingness to explore beyond what we perceive to be, we can come into direct contact with reality and with ourselves in a way that is quiet but very profound.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful summary right there. Thank you so much. I mean, that's incredible.
I know
Truly.
that these
I love your articulation.
Well, thank you. I mean, a lot of it has come from engaging with your teachings, and there are a lot of beautiful teachings on waking up, and everywhere. And I think that for anybody listening, it is important to find teachers that you really resonate with, teachers that do speak from that experience that allows you to be seen and heard and felt fully, but also know that willingness and openness allows you to be taught everywhere you go. But I highly suggest and recommend to anybody listening to this right now, listening to Kelly's teachings. I will put them all in the description of the podcast. Kelly's book, The Blind Spot Effect, How to Stop Missing What's Right in Front of You, is a wonderful gateway to discovering these realms of capability and potential and love and evolution that you are already walking around with. They're not foreign, they're not separate, they are here with you and always will be. And through opening and softening, we can meet these beautiful little parts of ourselves and love them fully. So Kelly, is there anything else you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Oh, I'm just really grateful to have had the chance to speak with you today. And yeah, it's a delight, because I love the work that you're doing, and I'm really glad that you reached out. These kinds of conversations are really important to me to have, because it's about the stuff that I love so much in Live, and I'm curious about. So I love hearing this interplay of like the way that you're able to articulate it back and in your words is really beautiful. So it's just been a pleasure to be here. And yeah, thanks for mentioning. Yeah, I have people can find me at I have a website, kellyboys.org, and I'm on Instagram, kelly.boys, and teach retreats and have different programs and things that I put out. So feel free, if you're interested in Yoga Nidra, definitely. I have some things that you can find, lots on YouTube, tons and tons of free hour-long classes I've done that are on YouTube through the Alembic in Berkeley. And so, you can get a lot just on YouTube, actually.
All right. Well, I'll drop the links to all of those in the description, everybody. Please go and really enjoy them. It's such a treat for the nervous system, and with a regulated, open nervous system, what you see changes because how you're seeing it has changed. And that is the most beautiful, superb gift that you can give yourself through a few minutes of intentional stillness and allowing yourself to be led. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here. You're a beautiful teacher, and I'm really grateful to be able to spread your word.
Thanks so much.